To the curious, the seekers, and the experts, welcome. You're listening to Poli-Psych Podcast. And now, if we have exhausted those topics, which of course we haven't.
Coronavirus again.
I know. It is almost inevitable.
All roads lead to coronavirus.
So we do have something else. It's a little more fun. All three of us are baby boomers, and all three of us really enjoy music.
No, I got to throw this out there that there is a preferred term for those of us who don't like baby boomer as a pejorative. Personally, I'm not too offended by it. I mean, or at all, if at all. But somebody suggested, saw this person on Twitter and generally really like what they say, the so-called baby boomers are actually Generation Alpha. So they are the generation with which we started talking about generation in terms like Generation X, etc. So think of baby boomers as Generation Alpha.
Okay, baby boomers. I don't have a problem with that. With being called a baby boomer. I know it's pejorative, so I know so our generation's getting blamed for some things, but we do, we've been in a very unique, as are all generations. We've been born into some interesting things. That's probably a good topic for a show sometime. But today we're going to skirt that and get right into what we all were entertained by reading about and also by listening to. And that is the fact that Bob Dylan has released a song that's not brand new. He recorded it some time ago, but he has been holding it back, and we'll speculate as to why perhaps he has been holding it back. But the song, I believe the song title is Murder Most Foul. And this song was written about the murder of John F. Kennedy. And people who have listened to it in depth believe that there are references to George Bush having participated in the murder of John F. Kennedy. So I'm sure both of you have some comments. But I will mention that, we also do have the video that Don referenced earlier, the speech that JFK gave. And JFK is a very much of a central figure in the QAnon phenomenon and in all the hearts and minds of certainly, and I'll use the term again, baby boomers and many others who have a passionate love for freedom. So I'll open up that conversation.
I guess the term "where we go one, we go all" came from, I think it was on John F. Kennedy's sailboat. It was emblazoned on the bridge.
I've heard it called a yacht. I think sailboat is the little baby thing.
Oh, right. Yes. Yacht. Nantucket. And yeah, John Kennedy, interesting juncture in politics. He really was wailing on the establishment. It was sort of, the handoff came from Eisenhower with his farewell speech. And it had to have been, I know that the two of them were in contact with each other and had a better relationship certainly than President Trump and Barack Obama do now or did then. And so that thinking carried over a little bit, and we'll never know. We won't know what happened yet, probably until all the files are released. But it looks like they really did 6 ways from Sunday. Is that what Schumer said?
Yeah, I can't help but when I saw that this morning that Bob Dylan had released this song, which of course nobody had ever heard of before because even though it was written a while ago, it's just released either late last night or early this morning. And I knew that it is a beginning of a cultural strategy. Cultural strategies being rolled out to reveal the truth. And that Americans have needed to know if this awakening is real, if it's expands beyond Q to be a truly American phenomenon. If we really do have a great awakening, it has to include as a central part of it understanding about the JFK murder, because that's the point at which the deep state took control of America. And many of us have researched that stuff and have known that stuff for a long time, but there has been very little penetration into the culture at large, although I have seen surveys that, or heard of surveys that as much as 65% of Americans believe that more than one person was involved in the JFK assassination, and or that the agency we call the clowns was very involved in that. So not Roger, but Oliver Stone's movie, JFK, and Jim Garrison research on the roots of that and the connections to Cuba. All of that stuff has been in the American consciousness, but never accepted at the highest levels. So it's been this, we've been in this cultural no man's land because of this unsolved murder. And if you do research and find out what JFK was doing on a few different levels right before the time that he was murdered, it's actually very clear that he was coming up against the establishment that today we refer to as the deep state. Many people in the time would call it the military-industrial complex that wanted their war in Vietnam, that JFK was ending. Many people in the financial realm know of his plans to take the Federal Reserve control away from the monetary system and implement a silver standard. All of that stuff is I believe, very real, but it hasn't been publicly known. And for the awakening to really take hold, Americans need to know this stuff. Now, I have also seen right along these lines as a cultural penetration of at the level that Bob Dylan is exposing in his 17-minute song is a film called Dark Legacy. And the Dark Legacy film exposes the Bush role in the JFK assassination. I would say for most people would be beyond a reasonable doubt. And it's purely factual, and it's well worth watching. I watched it long ago when it was basically little known on the internet, and it had very cartoonish graphics, but the text is almost the same as it was in those days, and it's much more professionally done now. So, and it had, I think, a different title. But at any rate, it is being promoted now with some very professional trailers, and I highly recommend that film to everybody, and share it with your friends so that people will know what happened and will know that that President Trump is taking on the people that killed JFK, and people, famous people like, there's been actors that have said that those that have been killed JFK are now running the government, and they've come right out and said that, and that's a pretty bold statement to say, but I believe that's true. But we need to have this enter into the public consciousness, and amazingly, Bob Dylan, I believe, has been prepared for this moment and has come forth with this song, and that again is 17 minutes long. It's such a coincidence. This is great stuff. Exciting.
As a cultural development, I'd say, obviously he's not revealing any evidence, but it's just interesting that he's always kind of gone against the grain in many fields, even in his own field of music. Probably the most notable thing about his history is when he went electric, which, he kind of came out of that coffee shop, era, and recognized as a brilliant writer, and had a great reputation with the coffee shop crowd. But he broke away from that crowd pretty decisively when he went electric, and he got a lot of negative feedback, called to sell out and all these other things. But he's always kind of followed his own path. He's for the MBTI fans out there, listed as either an INFP or an ISFP. I think the INFP is probably more accurate. But that's very deep. The strongest function there is introverted feeling, which can be very, very deeply held internal value system that's unshakable, unmovable, and very steadfast, but introverted. So not always out front and not always expressed right away, like the extroverted feeler would let you know right away how they, what they think about everything.
I'm sure Cindy will want to weigh in on this, but on the Enneagram, I see Bob Dylan most likely as a 4 with a pretty strong 5 wing. Possibly a 5, but I don't see any 6 there at all. So I'm going to go with 4, and again, let Cindy weigh in. But the introvert and the 4 is just the most. I've got to be genuine. I can't sell out kind of personality, and I see that as being very much who Bob Dylan is.
Yeah, honestly, it's tough for me to make a call between 4 and 5 with him because I would kind of lean toward 5 because he is so, there's a vibe about him that he's, I guess the word private it keeps popping into my mind, but it's more than that. And I won't say isolated, but he seems like the kind of person who doesn't really seek a lot of interaction with people. And one interesting thing that I do want to mention that kind of can be a reference to that is his reaction in the Grammys a few years ago. Well, several years ago. I think it was 98, when this guy just appeared on stage. It was very awkward. I don't watch the Grammys anymore, but I used to watch the Grammys, and I happened to be watching live when this happened. And this guy, bare-chested, just showed up on stage with Bob Dylan and began dancing. And he had the words "Soy Bomba," which is in Spanish. You would think it would be "Soy Bomba," but "Soy Bomba, I am the bomb." He just started dancing, and Bob Dylan just kept playing and singing, and he kept looking out of the corner of his eye at the guy, and it was a very awkward moment. Watching it, there was just a lot of, oh my gosh, what is going on? Everybody that I was watching with was, is this planned? What is this? And now looking back, I'm wondering whether this was actually some kind of a threat, intended as some kind of a threat to Bob Dylan, because people like Alex Jones have mentioned that Bob Dylan is very much awake, but that he has not wanted to openly participate in the freedom and truth movement, if I can call it that, because according to Alex Jones, someone in Bob Dylan's family was killed. And considering what Alex said about that, considering this appearance at the Grammys out of nowhere by this guy who it was said that he somehow managed to sneak in backstage and got on the stage. But we all know, even at that time, security for these kind of events is pretty tight. So I'm thinking now that Bob Dylan has felt the liberty to release this new song, that he must feel a new degree of safety. And maybe that's because, as we've been hearing, some of the people who intend evil for America and Americans have been taken out of play. So just a thought.
I agree with you, Cindy. I very much believe, and actually not too long after this event occurred that you're describing at the Grammys with the Soy Bomba guy, when that happened, it was a clear message that to Bob Dylan, your security's penetrated, we can get you anytime we want, and these are people that know that Bob Dylan knows, and they're on the other side. They don't want him talking, and no doubt in my mind that his life has been he's been told not to speak out about the things that he knows in music or otherwise, but now he's doing that. So what does that tell you? That tells you major shift is happening, that it's rocketing through society, that these guys, these bad guys, these deep state actors, they've been taken down, at least at the higher levels, the most significant levels, the levels that are necessary to exert their will nationally on the national stage, because obviously Bob Dylan is at that level. So this is huge. This is amazing. This is a glorious thing.
I think if you look back at the 60s, the Vietnam War going on, the targets, Martin Luther King was targeted, and if we assume that the story is credible, and it's becoming increasingly so, that John F. Kennedy was targeted, and many of the rock stars of that time were targeted as well, because they had tremendous influence. Bob Dylan had to have been probably the most targeted at that time, and somehow evaded capture, so to speak. But John Lennon was targeted. Who knows? How, we don't have any evidence either way.
Yeah, there's amazing interviews. It's still on, you can still find them on YouTube, of John Lennon being interviewed by Dick Cavett and making it clear that John Lennon absolutely did know what was really going on, and he corrected some popular misconceptions of the way that society was going that Dick Cavett was trying to promote. And I believe Dick Cavett was basically innocent, but John Lennon was clearly understood what was going on. And to address, Ken, your idea that, why wasn't Dylan taken out? I think there are multiple strategies that are used for various people. And, if they don't get you one way, they'll get you another way. Well, yeah, he had to have people around that were protecting him, and not on one front, but on multiple fronts. So it's, I am in the crowd that believes that Bob Dylan did become a born-again Christian, and basically was enabled to enlist the divine protection at a level that many people are not. So I see that as being a major factor.
Well, I think in conclusion, almost everyone involved in this situation, or any of, whether it's the impeachment or Seth Rich or the whistleblower, that there's definitely a deeper force of good versus evil, and it's almost an inescapable conclusion. It comes more quickly to some than others. And the events lately, for people that have been here, as the last thought for this show, that have been paying attention since about 2015, since I would say personally the death of Seth Rich, and it's just been one thing after another. And I know that for the average person, they think these things are unrelated, but they've come in such rapid, just like stair steps. One's over, and then the next one comes. The last iteration of that has been impeachment. Almost on the day or the week it collapsed, then all of a sudden we have this. Now, we can't prove anything. We never can, because whatever's going on, it probably wouldn't happen unless it couldn't be traced. But it's just way too thematic to be dismissed completely as unrelated random events.
Mm-hmm. One of the things in this context we don't want to forget to mention is that as President Trump was very good friends with JFK Jr. And worth noting here that President Trump has a deeply personal reason to take down those who killed his best friend's father.
To the curious, the seekers, and the experts, thank you for joining us for this presentation of Poli-Psych Podcast. We hope that you are staying well and safe, and that you have plenty of toilet paper. We also hope that you have enjoyed this presentation. And if you have enjoyed it, we ask you to please click like for the video, subscribe to us on YouTube, subscribe to us on BitChute. And if you don't want to miss a thing, follow us on Twitter. If you have a moment, please visit our website. Again, thank you for joining us. And until next time, take care.